Michelle is got a 4-hour time difference, so I'm just gonna move on.
Yeah.
I don't know where she is.
She's at a conference.
At a conference? Where is it? Yeah. Oh, in Halifax, she's in Halifax at a conference, okay. There's gonna be a change in order, sorry. Michelle's in Halifax, and she's online, but she's got a 4-hour time difference, so we're moving her to the front because it's late there. She's gonna come, she's gonna be, I think she's going to be, I'm not sure where she's gonna be.
That would be nice.
Deputy Mayor Dion, literally anywhere. Heidi knows, Heidi, where is Michelle gonna go?
Good afternoon. Are we online? Are we live? Okay. Good afternoon. It's 3:30, and I would like to call the October 7th regular meeting of council to order. I'm Deputy Mayor Anne-Marie de Andrade, and our mayor is away, so I'm chairing the meeting. So thank you very much. And with regard to the agenda, before we approve, I would like to make a change and bring item 5.3 to where we have on 4.1. So do I have approved? Okay. Second by Councilor, moved by Councilor Thompson, second by Councilor Lumley. All in favor? Okay, passed. So, and I would like to call for adoption of minutes of the special council meeting of September 29. Okay, moved by Councilor Lumley, second by Councilor Thompson. All in favor? Okay, so item 4.1, and our natural asset technician, Michelle Lewis, is online. So, and the item is about Federation of Canadian Municipalities Local Leadership for Climate Adaptation Initiative grant application. So I'll pass to Michelle Lewis. Is she trying to contact? Is she having a problem?
I think so. She declined to be a panelist.
Oh, okay. So let's go back to where we were. And so the first item is by law 2025-2026 permissive property tax exemption amendment by law number 1323-01-2025. And our manager of financial service will speak? Or we are just approving of, okay, so we go straight to the recommendation that the 2025-2026 permissive property tax exemption amendment by law number 1323-01-2025 be adopted. Moved by Councilor Lumley, second by Councilor Thompson. All in favor? Okay, passed. Thank you. And the next report is from our Chief Building Official, Placement of Community Charter, Section 57, Notice on Title 280 Arbutus Reach. Please, Chief.
Thanks. Yeah, so as per the report, there were some building brought to our attention, some substantial amount of decks being built, in addition to some interior renovations without permits. Communications with the owner resulted in their desire to go forward with a notice on title as opposed to obtaining the necessary permits. So here we are. If you have any questions, I'm happy to address them.
Please, Councillor Thompson.
What is the amount of fines on this property? And would it be approximate to where we would land if a permit were put in place?
I can't give you the exact amount of fines right here. I didn't include that in the report. I didn't know if it was appropriate to, but I can tell you that the permit fees would exceed the fines. Although for these type of renovations, I don't think the permit fees would be astronomical. It's definitely attainable. But the fines would be, yeah, much less, I guess. But yeah.
Councillor Lumley, please.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mayor. I guess I had a couple of questions. My first one was that if just the permitting process, and through the mayor, I'd like to, if there was, like, at what point do decks qualify for permits? Like, imagine if a deck had been built and permitted and approved, and then they wanted to, like, say, redo the wood on the deck. Would that automatically cause, like, I'm just trying to, if I look at this, and believe me, I'm no expert for sure, but so if somebody built a deck with the same footings and the same kind of framing, should they still get a permit?
It's a good question, and one that gets asked often. And sometimes it's hard to determine how far you can go without a permit, but typically we look at the structural elements. So if you're just replacing the decking, the boards on top, or the vinyl or something like that, it's usually just cosmetic in nature, and we don't usually get into permitting with that. But as soon as you start replacing the structural elements, joists, posts, beams, footings, now we're talking permit territory, because we have to ensure that they build it to code. And maybe the deck that they're replacing was never built to code in the first place, so there's safety aspects there. Reusing footings can be acceptable in certain scenarios, but we'd usually look to a structural engineer to confirm the existing footings are adequate for the deck that they're putting, even if they're replacing it with the exact same footprint. Also, oftentimes, existing decks are legally non-conforming or were built years ago before the new zoning bylaws would allow that placement. So there could be decks in areas that aren't allowed today. So if you remove a deck that could be in a development permit area, you wouldn't be able to rebuild it in the same area. This particular property didn't have that case. They were actually outside of those development permit areas or the setbacks, fortunately, but there was substantial structural reconstruction of these decks and additional decks built from what was there before. Typically, decks require permits if they're over 2 feet, attached to the dwelling, things like that, and structural elements are being applied.
Please go ahead.
Thank you for that explanation, and I just had one other question. So the I could be wrong, but I kind of get the idea that the notice on title, I don't know if it doesn't seem to have teeth, because this is the second case where somebody's got a notice on title issued because they built something that could either conform with the permits, or this guy didn't get permits. He seemingly doesn't care. So does a notice on title, so what about liability? That's all. Like if if we can't, like, I guess my question is if we don't have the power to either, if the guy just keeps going ahead with construction, what about like liability, like as far as like building codes and safety and stuff like that? If you can't really stop him and he just pays the fines, is, I guess, the town or this removes liability, does it, the notice on title? I was just curious about that, that's all. Because it's quite a large staircase that he's built on the rocks there down to the water, I assume, but anyway, that was my question,
Right,
whether
that's a great
liability.
question, and yeah, I would love to hear the answer from staff.
Sure, yeah, I can address that as best as I understand it. To clarify, though, the picture with the stairs going down to the water wasn't inclusive of this stop work order. Those were there before we were there, so as far as I know, those have been existing for some time, so I'm not really addressing those. And oftentimes, access down to the water, if it's not attached to the building, this is a set of stairs as access, so I kind of a gray area, but I don't focus as much on those as I do as the dwelling itself and what's attached to it, or providing access to the dwelling. Regardless, though, to address your notice on title question, you're right. It mainly alerts potential purchasers of the property that there's a compliance issue with the property. It doesn't necessarily take any liability off of the owner or the town or the potential buyer. It's merely just to let anybody know there's a compliance issue with the property. So at most, I imagine it would protect the town from somebody being upset that we didn't alert them that there was an issue with the property that they're going to purchase. Further enforcement can be done if it were more of a safety concern or something that council decided needed some further action. But that's how I understand as far as the liability goes. It's just to warn potential owners, future owners.
I'm just curious now, what possible further action, if you have like something in mind. Another thing we were also contemplating is if this would impact insurance. Maybe Rebecca.
So how do you mean insurance? Insurance to who? Sorry, could you read?
Sorry, home insurance. I don't know if it would impact the fact that there's a notice on title.
Home insurance isn't something that we would get involved in. That would be the owner's responsibility to look into, and I suppose it could depend on the insurer. So I'm not sure. I don't think I can answer that one.
I think we have more questions.
Sorry, addressing your enforcement question, I guess there's a few other tools. We could require them to tear it down, but that could involve further legal action beyond just local government enforcement. So it's typically for more severe infractions, maybe a commercial setting, but ultimately it's council's decision to go one way or another. It's not something that we would determine from the building department.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, please. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Councillor Crowe. You usually is here on the table. Okay, we have questions from Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Well, I was going to move the recommendation, but just I think something that's very valid is that, there are serious safety concerns with this project that are being ignored, and applying for a proper building permit certainly offers the opportunity for the structure to be properly inspected and become compliant with existing codes. So I think it's really important that any potential purchaser be aware of the fact that this is basically a non-compliant structure. So I would like to move the recommendation that the notice on title be be applied to this project.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah. We have a seconder, Councillor Lumley, and all in favor? It passes. Thank you. Our next item is the Director of Planning and Development, OCP Public Engagement Summary and new OCP Policy Direction. Oh. Yeah, okay, since our natural asset technician is back, I would put this item in front. And again, I would repeat, is the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Local Leadership for Climate Adaptation Initiative is a grant application. Please, Michelle.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Apologies for the confusion with me getting on as a panelist. So this grant application is on behalf of the Coastal Climate Resilience Collaborative, of which there's staff members from local governments around at Catsum, Howe Sound, town of Gibsons being one of them. The collaborative was, can you hear me okay? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The collaborative was formed in 2024, October, with funding through the Natural Resource Canada Climate Resilient Coastal Communities Program. So ICLEI Canada is supporting this collaborative, and the collaborative was brought together to highlight climate initiatives happening within the region and to create opportunities for collaboration within those communities, and with the vision that within the 3-year time period of this collaborative, that we would bring forward initiatives that conceptually had been worked through with these municipalities, and determine which ones ICLEI could help support move to implementation. And part of that is for ICLEI to support the collaborative in applying for grants to undertake this work. And so the collaborative voted on a couple different initiatives, and the one that the town of Gibsons staff is hoping to move forward is to create community resilience hubs. So we would be working as the lead municipality, and Bowen Island Municipality is going to be doing some sites as well. And these resilience hubs would be not necessarily focused on built infrastructure as cooling centers or areas of refuge during climate events, that we would be focusing on green spaces and natural areas to provide relief from heat events, from smoke events, air quality events. And so it's an opportunity for us, for Gibsons and Bowen Island, to equip these areas with emergency supplies, such as there's in Victoria, this resilient neighborhood community, or sorry, this resilient neighborhood group has worked with their communities, putting these kiosk benches, and they have emergency supplies. They have solar panels for people to charge their cell phones. And we're kind of hoping that this would be like a community by community or neighborhood by neighborhood approach for resiliency. And another aspect of it is to provide better access to these green spaces. So one of the areas is Arrowhead Park, and that site was chosen because of its proximity to the senior center and also child care center that is adjacent to the property. So we hope through this grant that we would be able to support Harmony Hall in like with emergency supply equipment, potentially a generator, and then also have direct access with more accessible trails through the park, and some fire smarting, and then also like some tree planting to build up that ecosystem that's not potentially in the best state at this point. Yeah, and then also just have some messaging through signage, but also direct messaging on like online portals, so people can share resources and provide information about where the community should go to in times of emergency, and just kind of empowering the community to take their own steps towards their safety within these or during these climate events. So the grant application deadline is Thursday, October 9th. We have the collaborative communities are all on board, and we're getting letters of support from those communities, and this is kind of the last piece. We have the pre-application was approved by FCM, so we've been working with them for the past couple of months, and so now this is the final application will be submitted, hopefully tonight or tomorrow morning, with council's approval for yes. So I'll leave it there and happy to answer any questions.
That's great. I actually have a question with regard to the 1 million. I'm assuming that 1 million is just Town of Gibson's portion, right, of the application?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, the 1 million is the total amount of grant funding that would be allocated, and we are still working through how much would be allocated to Gibsons and how much to Bowen Island. And I will say that so this is a collaborative with District of Squamish, District of North Van, West Van, Bowen Island, SCRD, and the collaborative as a whole looked at which municipalities would be capable to bring this initiative forward. And because this is a one-time grant funding opportunity, like the town of Gibsons potentially could only apply for this grant once, we couldn't apply for it in subsequent years. That's to be determined still. And so we step forward as the lead applicant, but knowing that the other communities like North Van and Squamish, et cetera, that they will benefit from this because it will be essentially a framework for how you could potentially build a resilience hub within the community. So the allocation of funds, we're just finalizing that tonight, but that would be split between Bowen Island and the town of Gibsons.
Yeah, thank you, because $1 million lately
It's not much.
cannot buy too much. Yeah, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
I believe Councilor Thompson, you have a question?
No, I was gonna.
Oh, okay, now I have Councilor Crowe with a question. Please, Councilor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you for this report, Michelle. I just wanted to inquire, you mentioned that the Arrowhead Park was the area that was being considered. Was there any consideration to any development or improvements being done to the sort of what's currently known as the White Tower Park area?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, White Tower Park, Arrowhead Park, those were both highlighted as areas that we wanted to focus our efforts. And another one was Georgia Beach, because of the potential transit and access to the bluff during potential events could cut those residents off. And so if there were to be a marine evacuation, then Georgia Beach would be an ideal site to make sure that we're enhancing it so that it's more accessible with trails down to the beach. Yes, so it's those three green spaces that are being considered at this point.
That's great. Councilor Crowe, do you have another question?
No, I was just going to say if there weren't any other questions, I'd certainly move the recommendation.
Do I have a question? Okay, yeah, thank you. So the recommendation is that staff be directed to submit an application to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Local Leadership for Climate Adaptation Initiative for a network of climate resilient hubs, with the town of Gibson serving as the lead municipality and ICLEI Canada as the lead applicant on behalf of the Coastal Climate Resilience Collaborative. So thank you. Yeah, that's great. And I think we have a mover and a second. On all in favor? It passes. Thank you, Michelle. Enjoy your time. So we are now moving to, Director of Planning, OCP Public Engagement Summary and new OCP Policy Direction.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I'm really excited to be at this stage of the OCP project. It was a lot of work doing all the engagement, and now we're presenting the What We Heard report. And then the next meeting, next council meeting, we'll be presenting what we heard on the zoning bylaw. So we're bringing them in as we review all the feedback. We do have Colton Kursop here online, and he's going to be sharing his screen and presenting the report.
Perfect. Please, Colton. Can you hear us?
Colton's on mute.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Just give me a moment. Yeah, so there are two parts to this presentation. In part one, I'll provide a high-level summary of the engagement feedback on the draft OCP. And in part two, I'll discuss our recommended changes to the OCP in response to the feedback that was received. I'll conclude the presentation with an outline of next steps and timing on the remaining milestones of the project. And of course, I'll be pleased to take any questions from council if there are any. So in part one of the engagement, it was really focused around engagement awareness building, the fact that engagement is happening. The goal of the engagement was to make sure that lots of people knew that this project was happening and that they knew how they could provide their input or to intersect with the project team and learn more about it and just get their questions answered. So data was collected in a number of different ways. We used an online survey. We also gathered written feedback through conversations at the in-person pop-up events. And we gathered general comments through email submissions to a unique email address for the project. Referral comments were also gathered from key interest holders through the referral process that was led by your staff team. Highlights from the engagement program includes the following. There was 28 days of an open engagement period when people could either fill out the survey or provide their comments back or reach out to staff through the email channel to get questions or to provide their positions. There was 14 hours of direct engagement in the public setting at those pop-up engagement events, and there were over 2,500 postcards delivered in the community. Very glad that that went out before the postal interruption. 12 social media posts were used to promote engagement, and there were 7 in-person engagement events where over 100 people interacted with staff at those pop-ups. There were 216 responses to that online survey, and just over 50 email submissions were received. So very good level of engagement, very broad awareness was certainly achieved. In terms of what we heard, we did hear strong support for the transparent and inclusive engagement process that was used. We also heard support for the efforts to balance growth and development opportunities with environmental protection. We also heard that there were opportunities to improve the locations and naming conventions of some of the proposed land use designations. Particularly, we got feedback around the service, commercial, and tourist commercial designations, and some concerns about the placement of some of the high-density residential and civic institutional designations. So we revisited those, and we'll get into that in a little bit in the presentation. There was also support for the form and character development permit areas and the focus on building quality design and pedestrian orientation. There was also support for the development permit area for environmentally sensitive areas for the protection of riparian and forest ecosystems, and an appreciation for the Aquifer Protection DPA and the efforts to preserve Aquifer 560. So getting into each of the sort of engagement areas, we had strong support for the vision statement. Over 71%, almost 72% of respondents either strongly supported or somewhat supported that vision statement. And some of the common themes were the opportunity to further align the statement's commitment to protecting valuable or natural assets, or the opportunity to clarify some of the high-level terms like unique coastal charm. But overall, very high level of support for that vision statement. When it came to the land use designations, as I indicated a little bit earlier, there was less support for those and more concern about them. There was 40% of respondents either supporting or strongly supporting the designations. And there was a lot of consensus that some of those designations needed a bit of a revisit. And the concerns really centered on the 42% of comments that emphasized the need to be really clear about preserving the Charmin lands and the English Trail, with some confusion over the proposed name change when it was shown as civic institutional, showing up on the map in blue. There was 18% of comments expressed some concern about the location of some specific high density residential designations in Upper Gibsons, just west of Park Road. So we'll revisit those in terms of what we propose to do about it. In terms of form and character development permit area, we got just over a majority, slimly 50% of respondents either strongly supporting or somewhat supporting that DPA. 37% of respondents said that maintaining a balanced scale of development and improving architectural cohesion in the DPA subareas would strengthen the OCP, and 20% of respondents appreciated the preservation of low-scale development in the Lower Gibsons or Gibsons Landing area. When it comes to the environmentally sensitive areas, DPA, very strong, very high levels of support, with respondents either strongly in support or somewhat in support of the DPA. And in terms of common themes, 50% of comments suggested reviewing the DPA map and the land use map to ensure that there aren't overlap with environmentally sensitive areas and development in the medium or high density category. And then there are 23% of comments supporting the overall intentions of the ESA DPA. When it comes to aquifer protection, very high levels of support, again, for the proposed development permit area. 72% of comments supported proposed excavation limits and professional review ahead of development approval, and 58% supported efforts made to protect Aquifer 560 and its recharge zones, including the specific details around the depth of excavation. And in terms of some of the referral feedback, the town shared the draft with a number of referral agencies and made a presentation to the SCRD on the draft plan. The responses were received from the 10 agencies that you see on the slide there, ranging from the advisory design panel to BC Transit to Vancouver Coastal Health and the Squamish Nation, just to name a few. The details of these referral responses is contained in the What We Heard report. As some of the responses were very specific in nature, we need to review the feedback and determine the specific approach to addressing some of those requests in consultation with the staff project team. And we will provide some detailed recommendations for council consideration when the OCP is brought forward for council consideration in November. So in terms of the engagement summary, what we're going to do with engagement is use it, and I will transition to those slides in just a moment, to inform updates to the draft OCP. In addition, those documents will still be informed by feedback from council, and recent engagement on the draft zoning bylaw is going to be informing a round of changes to the zoning bylaw, which we'll be bringing to council later in October in terms of the feedback on the draft zoning bylaw. And then there'll be opportunities for some additional ongoing revisions to the draft OCP by the project team in advance of bringing it to council, and then also before public hearing and after public hearing. Updates will ensure that the two bylaws are aligned and provide you with a consistent zoning and official community plan framework. So I'll just move into part 2 of the presentation. So these are the recommendations for refinement. what we proposed to change in the OCP in response to the feedback that was received in the public engagement. So on the vision statement, since there was a high level of support for that vision statement, our recommendation is to keep the proposed vision statement as it is currently drafted, given that there is a strong majority of support for the draft vision, and it has benefited from, as you know, quite a number of refinements from staff as well as council. There's still opportunities for wordsmithing, but we don't have any specific recommendations since there was a high level of support for that vision statement. When it comes to land use designations, we do have some recommendations here. And this is really to address what we heard. When we take a deeper look at the concerns, it became clear that there were 4 issues that could be addressed with changes to the land use map and the land use designation table. The concerns were concentrated on the civic institutional designation being applied to the Charmin lands in the Inglis Trail area. And what we propose here, this is just a summary of the issues. So that's one issue. The next issue was the high density residential. There were some concerns over the location of higher density development in Upper Gibsons. There was also some concern about the naming of light industrial properties as service commercial. And then there were also some concerns about the potential tourism accommodation use because it really is limited to hotels and a limited number of tourist serving uses. So the opportunity here is to revisit that designation. So the recommendation to respond to the feedback on the Charmin lands is to change that designation to parks and recreation and conservation and open space. So the effect here would be on the map, making sure that there's really clear green space designation for park in that location, and conservation and open space in alignment with the ravine in that location. When it comes to changing the high density residential designations, the proposed response is to switch them to medium density residential to reduce privacy concerns and perceived conflicts with height, and to provide gradual transition in height and density in Upper Gibsons. We propose to change the name of the service commercial designation to industrial commercial to better communicate the intent of the designation, which continues to allow and support those blended industrial commercial uses. And when it comes to tourist commercial, we propose to merge this into the mixed use commercial designation. So effectively, tourist commercial is deleted. The upshot of that is that it enables a mix of commercial, tourist accommodation, and residential options in Lower Gibsons and Gospel Rock. So there's just a broader range of opportunities that go beyond what the tourist commercial designation offered. So what this looks like on the land use map is what I'll walk you through right now. And I'll just get my laser pointer going. So number 1, the designation name change from service commercial to industrial commercial is over here. We have also made sure that we cover the entire parcel from the Gibsons Way, Sunshine Coast Highway, from the frontage all the way to the back of the lots. And that was based on some feedback that administration received in response to these proposed designations. The second change is to change the medium density residential, to change the proposed high density sites over here to medium density. So they're no longer shown as brown, they're now shown in orange. And that's to achieve a more gradual transition towards the high point in Gibson. So you have development stepping down from the highest intensity and providing that transition into the lower density. And then the third change was to the Charmin lands down here. It was shown all in blue. It is now shown mostly in green with the exception of the developed affordable housing site. And in a future edit of this map, we are committing to you now that we will also actually be showing the ravine under the conservation and open space designation. So there is another edit to be made here, but you will be able to see that conservation and open space and the parks and recreation designation apply to the Charmin lands. Fourth big change that I mentioned was merging tourist commercial with the mixed use commercial to enable that broader mix of uses in Lower Gibsons and Gospel Rock, but also the designation does allow hotels, so there's certainly still a tourist dimension to that work. And so there was one property in Gospel Rock and there was one in Lower Gibsons that have been swapped to mixed use commercial. The other note just to make is there's also an additional star up here. This is a new piece. It's intended to indicate the future expansion of an existing very well used parkland tennis courts area in Upper Gibsons. So the other feedback was on development permit areas. And you'll see there on the slide that we got a really strong level of support for the environmentally sensitive area DPA. We got a sort of middle of the ground, but still very positive level of support for aquifer protection DPA, and a majority, just a slim majority of support for the forming character DPA. So our recommendation is to retain those DPAs as proposed, given fairly high levels of support, as well as the fact that multiple different consultants and Gibson staff and council have informed the preparation of those guidelines. In terms of additional recommendations for refinement, we did get a lot of feedback from those 10 referral agencies, so we will be and have already started working our way through them. But we really wanted to focus today's conversation on the big moves that responded to the public's feedback. And so we will have to take a look at some, I'd say policy refinements, revisions, or maybe inserting some additional policy statements to address the referral agency feedback. And that process is ongoing. We will make sure to highlight that when the draft OCP is brought forward for first and second reading. In terms of next steps, just a little timeline slide here, just to indicate that the refinement component is in progress with engagement having wrapped up on the zoning bylaw. We're also compiling that What We Heard report, and that's coming to council in mid-October, and then we'll begin moving into the council presentation and submission process, and the public hearing is scheduled for early November. The public hearing was scheduled in early November, but it will actually probably take place in mid to late November, and we propose the readings process through year end, and then it has to go for ministerial approval and adoption or enactment, which will probably take place early in 2026. So that concludes my presentation. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Colton. Before we move to ask questions, could you clarify when you first explained the move from tourist, the designation, specific tourist to mixed use? You mentioned something that I kind of didn't get. I don't know if there could be, is it gonna, are we going to have more possibility for Airbnbs, or there will be an impact on tourism? That's what I didn't get exactly what you said. Please, if you could clarify.
Certainly. So the tourist commercial designation, even though it's called tourist commercial, it didn't actually afford a lot of commercial opportunities. It was fairly restricted to hotels and some limited commercial activities like restaurants, and I don't even know if it allowed for sales. I might have to ask Leslie Ann about that. But it was very restrictive. And so the feedback we got was, if in your mixed commercial designation, you're allowing hotels, why don't you just allow the mixed use commercial designation on those locations? Because it provides so many more opportunities. It could be restaurants, it could be shops, it could be apartments above ground, and it could be a hotel, or it could be short-term rentals. So we went with the broader range of opportunities that are presented in the commercial mixed use designation.
Okay, so that's wonderful. Thank you. So I start asking, I have many questions, but I'll start asking council. Okay, Councilor Lumley, please.
I have a couple questions through the mayor. In the report, it mentioned something about like ALR land, and the feedback from the ALR was that some of the land, I wouldn't mind getting clarification where that is exactly, because I thought, did it say it's part of White Tower, I think, area, and then the ALR said they wanted it included in the report to emphasize that there's specific regulations attached to ALR land. I mean, it's not, obviously not designated in any color on here where the area is, but I just wondered if maybe get some clarification on that.
Perfect. I think our Director of Planning.
Thank you. Through Deputy Mayor. So we do have some ALR lands in the northwest corner of Gibsons, and they are designated agricultural lands in the OCP. And White Tower Park is also in the ALR. It's agricultural land, but the town has permission to use it the way it's being used. So that's addressed, that's a policy that was brought forward from the previous OCP and confirmed by the Agricultural Land Commission. So we wanted to get their feedback to make sure we're meeting the legislation in the OCP.
Perfect. Thank you. Do you have another question?
I'll let someone else go.
Okay. Councilor Thompson, please.
Yeah, thank you, to you, Mayor. The land use recommendations are all excellent. I thought it was great to see Charmin lands, so it was clear that that was something that needed to be addressed. We heard a lot about that. My one concern is with the high, medium, and low density residential land use designations. So if the purpose of this recommendation is to endorse the land use designations that are presented here, can you help me understand how this aligns with the forthcoming zoning draft? For example, we have some residents, and it's even noted in here, that there's concern with heights, looking at low density height from 8 meters to 11 meters, which would effectively allow 3 stories in low density areas. So when we reach the draft zoning bylaw stage, if council believes it appropriate to introduce a new density designation, by accepting the recommendations here today, can we go back based on the feedback we receive from zoning, public feedback? Do you know what I'm saying?
Thank you for the question. I have similar concerns, but I'll wait the response from our director, and then I'll elaborate on my concerns too. Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, you can go back. Right now, council hasn't given any of the bylaws first reading. So right now, we are massaging it to try and get it in the right spot. When we do bring forward what we heard report from the zoning, so generally the feedback from the pop-ups were very positive at the OCP level. It was very positive. When it came down to zoning, there was a little bit more hesitation because there were more details about what you can do on your land, and questions about, well, what will my neighbor do and how's it going to affect me? So the feedback is going to be different, and it might cause some concern over the land use designations, and we might need to revisit them a little bit again, which is why we're doing these projects together. But for now, what we're looking for from council is direction to proceed with responding to the public feedback in this way. And then we're going to do the same for what we heard for the zoning. And depending on how we respond to the zoning, it might mean we need to change the land use designation in the OCP.
Thank you, Director. Do you have another question?
No, that was excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'll elaborate on, I have a series of questions, but I'll start with the zoning because one of my concerns, I didn't see the pamphlet on my mailbox. And I thought maybe it was me, maybe it was something. And then I started asking around, and I asked now for over a dozen people, and nobody heard about the zoning. So I'm not saying it could be what I suspect. If I don't know how many pamphlets were mailed, it could be that everything went inside the newspaper and people throw their junk mail. But to me, there are many people that I ask that they are concerned with that. But they didn't know, so they were fully aware of the OCP, all the stage, they provided feedback, but when it comes to zoning, they didn't know it was happening, and now it's closed. So I have a concern because now I'm starting to get personal feedback. I'm asking, obviously, whatever to send to staff, but I'm concerned with the timing now because if we endorse this document, and now the next timeline, actually, it's mid-October, we're gonna have the report from the zoning. I'm afraid that these people, and not only in my neighborhood, I got feedback from people from other areas as well, they didn't see. And it just makes me think that, I don't know, maybe it was missed with the other junk mail or something else, which I don't know. And I'm quite concerned with this to start with. So I don't know how I mean, the people who I spoke with, I said, please still send your feedback. But I just want to understand the compilation and coming back to council without addressing. Another thing, for example, yesterday we got a letter and specific about industrial areas. And according to the letter, there's more industrial areas now, service industrial, than before. And then, I mean, it's very hard for council. I don't have an opinion about it, but I would like to hear staff with the rationale the same way where we received today about the bluff, which gave me like, oh, okay, so it's not, how certain people are picturing what could be because of the steep slopes. So I think I'm trying to find here like a common ground where people who didn't hear about still have time, and the report that is brought back to council, it has the feedback from these people, because these people are hearing right now, starting to talk right now. Please.
Thank you. I will try to answer some of those questions. So in terms of the flyers, I'm not sure what happened there if not everyone got them. We did try and make them look different so that people wouldn't think that they had already seen it and throw them out. That was a concern because we had the engagement pretty close to each other. And some people did walk by the pop-ups and say, oh, I've already commented on this, and we kind of had to lure them in and say, this is different, this is the zoning bylaw, it's different to the OCP. And staff did bring more feedback in just by, trying to bring people in and ask about if they knew how it affect their property. But we did use Canada Post to do a mail out, and then we hand delivered flyers. So we tried to get everybody in Gibsons. It's not a legislative requirement, but it was our best attempt at trying to reach people who wouldn't necessarily know what's going on. It's not the last opportunity to comment either. So again, this hasn't come to council for first reading. We are in the draft stage of this. And when we bring it to council for first reading, we're still going to hold a public hearing. And so at that point, we have to notify. We have to follow the legislative process to notify. And then we'll get comments through the public hearing process. And that's when we're going to capture everyone who hasn't commented yet. And then we would refine the documents following the public hearing before we bring it back to council for second and third reading. Okay, so if I, just on this subject, so why,
because right now, I almost feel a little bit crunch, because in a way, zoning, it's not that it's more important, but I think, once the OCP is, people are more relaxed, the zoning becomes a big part, because many people, they don't know that the low density now is not as before. And I think that's one of my concerns. So if we are having, if all this much people are starting to send, I know some people already sent some, their concerns or their support, but there will be some people that might take a week or more to send. And why? And then we are having the first reading, and then feedback. Why are we having the second reading and third reading together? I'm just concerned with this, the speed of the process right now.
So the speed of the process is really being driven by the Housing Accelerator Fund initiative. So the entire project is being funded through that Housing Accelerator Fund. And as part of the proposal, the contract that we signed with CMHC was that we would have this completed by the end of the year, this year. So we're already going to be late in delivering on the timeline. But that's really what's driving this timeline. But it's not unusual to do second and third reading together, or first and second reading together.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that, by the time people receive the feedback, we almost have to, we will look at the material, but there won't be too much opportunity. So I really, I don't know how other counselors feel. I would like to see this spread, even if it's the time it's short, but and we already extended the period anyways. I just feel that it's such an important document that's gonna change radically how the composition of the town. And in a way, it will save a lot of time in the future, because once the zoning is consolidated, there will not, basically nothing's coming to council unless it's an OCP amendment. So I would like just to, also for the people to have a peace of mind, because at least the people who I spoke, when they realized, oh no, I know nothing about it, and they felt rushed. So I would, do councilors have more questions? Because I do have more questions. Okay, it doesn't look like. So my other question is, I remember when there was requested suggestion for organizations that we are in contact all the time, there are stakeholders. I provided the name, the Sunshine Coast Conservation Association. And I don't understand why they were, well, maybe the first question is, were they contacted?
They were sent a draft of the OCP, yes.
So they didn't respond, okay.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much, I appreciate that. My other question regards, even though I saw and before I say thank you for the report and the recommendations, because a lot of the comments have been addressed, so I appreciate that. Everything that was addressed here is great. One question is why, even though there's a lot of feedback that medium and high density in environmental sensitive areas were a concern, why, and this is in the report, why this has not been addressed in any way? And I'm concerned with high density, especially because of the lot, sorry, how do you call? Lot coverage, thank you. The lot coverage that jumps to 75% to 80%. So my concern is also people who live there have the impression that, okay, I can have a lot coverage of 80%, but there will still be a process of environmental assessment. But, it's just like, if I would like to see, first of all, a science-based justification how you can have medium density and high density in environmental sensitive areas, especially on freshwater and riparian, because it's not even the terrestrial. Because the terrestrial, they can have more stable ecosystem. Even though our our DPA for environment sensitive areas talks about to avoid development in environmental sensitive areas. So I feel that this was not addressed this time in the OCP.
To the deputy mayor, I can speak to that. I've prepared a specific slide, so I'll share my screen. So what I'm intending to show here is a couple of examples. So the first step in an environmentally, hopefully that's showing now. The first step is to check the ESA map and find out if the development's in an ESA area. We're going to assume it is because that's the point of the question. And so the proponent needs to hire an environmental professional to prepare an environmental assessment of the site. The job of that professional is to prepare those science-based analysis to identify what could be appropriate setbacks from a watercourse, for example, or from, just as a hypothetical example, a set of trees with nesting birds, bats, or other animals. The mitigations are required no matter if it's low density or high density development. And then just as an example, I'll walk you through the two diagrams in a second. One high density building could fit in the same space as 3 or more low density buildings. So through this process, the process can be agnostic on whether one high density building takes up the same amount of space as 3 very low density residential lots. And so it's really the job of that environmental professional and the ESA process to say, okay, you've got some creeks on this parcel, you've got some heron nests potentially, some rookeries in here. So whether it's a high density single development or multi-lot low density development, they're going to have the same spatial impact. And so it's really up to that qualified professional to identify what an appropriate setback is from the creek and to make sure that specific trees that are of high ecological value as habitat or as a unique species are protected. And so this is sort of what we're sort of suggesting here is, whether it's low density development is fully capable of providing as much destruction as a high density development. And so in either of these cases, we're just trying to point out that high density development can take place in a way that is done outside of the key features that are identified either in aquatic or terrestrial habitats. Happy to take any further questions.
Thank you, Couto. This is great. I think my concern, it was not necessarily with whether it's high or low, it's regarding the lot coverage, which in low density is usually 50%, while in high density is 80%. So that matters. We're not talking necessarily the footprint of the building. And then another question, does it mean that the environmental, and that's a question perhaps for our director of planning, does it mean that before even the proponent brings the design of the building, do they have to do the environmental assessments first? Okay.
Yes, that's correct. So the environmentally sensitive areas development permit area has a different function than zoning. So the purpose of it is to protect the environmentally sensitive area from development. So before a building permit can be issued, they need to hire a qualified professional, they need to do the assessment, a site-specific assessment. So what we've done in our ESA process, we've looked at what areas could be environmentally sensitive areas, we've applied a buffer to them, and we've mapped them. So what's mapped might not all be in an environmentally sensitive area, and that's where a site-specific assessment is important to identify what is sensitive. There's also a restoration component. So the qualified environmental professional might look at the site and go, well, that's low value, this is high value. You're in a medium density residential land use designation. In order to build this, we want you to restore this portion and landscape it in this way, and then you can build your high density over there. So that site-specific assessment is very important, and that's the role of the development permit area. The zoning is just what you can build and what the setbacks are and what the lot coverage is, but they're going to have to meet the development permit area guidelines before a building permit can be issued.
Okay, so just a clarification for a peace of mind. So let's say that whatever site, and I understand some sites that will probably be able to do the 80% and others not. So if I'm a developer and I find that my site, I won't be able, can they say, well, but the zoning permits 80%, or they will say, well, sorry, in this lot you can only do 40%. Is this how it happens?
So if something like that happened, they might say, okay, well, we want to have a setback variance because we want to move the building closer to the front property line, or we want a height increase because in order to protect this area, we've got a smaller footprint to work with, so therefore we want to go up and get the same density. So that's where there are tools to work around the protection of the environmentally sensitive area and then grant variances to support the development through zoning. So there's multiple ways that this could happen, but they're different regulations, the development permit and the zoning.
Okay, well, I'll stop here, but I'm still concerned because if some lots, they will have to even increase further the height because they say, well, I'm not able to do the 80% lot coverage. We already having maximum heights, so now we're gonna have to, do we have an obligation to give the proponent more heights?
No, that's a council decision.
Okay, thank you. I may have more questions, but I need 1 second to look at my notes. I think I'm satisfied for the questions. No, because I wasn't sure she asked, Councilor Thompson asked some of the questions. So I think we have the recommendations, and I just want to clarify that supporting this document doesn't mean that we are not concerned with other things that have not been addressed, because that was my concern, that if you say we endorse this document, means, okay, nothing can be changed. And I just hope that, and actually it's a question, would we be able, because what I would like to, for me to endorse, in particular for me, but I believe for other councilors, for me to endorse something, especially with the level of change that we will be experiencing, it's important to know the rationale. So with regards to industrial lands, for example, right, there's the discussion whether we are increasing, we are decreasing. I just want to have feedback, a solid feedback from staff so we can understand and because obviously the landowner has some vision and it's hard for us to decide without like important facts. So apparently the amount of industrial land has been increased, but I'm not sure. And if it has been, what is the justification? So that's, hopefully we council can have this understanding for us to help us to support or not. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So a lot of the industrial lands that were in the Seamount Way, Venture Way neighborhood were moved out and replaced with mixed-use commercial to basically bring that Venture Way, that new Venture Way style of development into the area. That was supported through the complete communities assessment for the infrastructure that's there, the fire flows, the access to daily needs and walkability of that area. And even some of the property owners contacted us and said, can you make my property mixed-use commercial as well? So we did look at the sites and try and figure out which ones were existing industrial lands that needed to be retained. But even then, some property owners said, I want to go into mixed-use commercial. And then we also heard through pop-up conversations that there was concern of loss of the industrial lands. And the two properties on the west boundary of Gibsons, one is already an industrial site. And so the thought process was, well, we can expand that industrial area on that side since we're also bringing it down on the south side of the highway. The property owners don't support it. They will need to do a rezoning if they do come forward with a development application, which is no difference to what they were going to have to do in the first place. So we hadn't received a rezoning application. We had a lot of conversations with the developer. But again, it'll come to council, and council can consider at that time whether the proposal is worth going through a rezoning for.
Thank you. I appreciate the answer. Councillor Crowe, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just for clarification, and I believe Colton did mention it, that what we're looking at now is, and if we move this recommendation, everything is not cast in stone.
Yeah.
It is going to be massaged in conjunction with what we hear back in the, what we heard from the bylaw. Is that correct? You're on mute, Colton.
Please, Colton.
Sorry, it says a sticky button today. Yeah, just as a refresher, we have this process as well here. So we're presenting today the What We Heard report on the OCP. We will come back to you in 2 weeks with the What We Heard report on the zoning bylaw. So we'll get lots of additional feedback on zoning in a couple of weeks. We have time in our process to make refinements to the zoning bylaw before bringing it to council for consideration. And then there are also some opportunities for some additional refinement, both prior to and after public hearing. And then, you know, the process will be what it will be, but there's a couple of opportunities here to refine the zoning bylaw. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, I know, and I know we talked about this before in the previous meeting, but my understanding, I could be wrong, was that civic institutional, so regarding Charmin land, it still protects it in a way that, but it's an important piece of land. The town owns the land. If it's in the OCP as parks and recreation, does that kind of, except for that one little corner, but does that kind of paint us into a corner, so to speak, in the fact that, the town's, it's almost like a park or a recreational facility will be, it's like financed through development in a way. Does that mean that the town has to put a park in there? Like, does that become part of the parks function and so on and so forth? Or can you do anything with that land? Is the town, if we say it's a park and people go in there and, I don't think it's monitored or cleaned or, if someone gets hurt in there, like they'll say, well, it's a park, right? I just went in there and I just wasn't sure, like, because the Civic Institute, part of me was saying, well, I think that was just an updating to a modern term for planning. I thought that's what my understanding was, but I don't know. I'm just curious if we designate that as a park, if we're going a little bit too far one way.
Great question. Thank you. Director, please.
That is a good question, and I don't know what our responsibility of maintenance of a park is, but this is a land use designation, so it's not a formal park dedication that would happen. Like, for example, if you subdivide properties, say you subdivide one parcel into 4, there's a formal park dedication process, and it's labeled as park on the survey plans, and it's parkland. We're not doing that here. We're painting it a color on a map and saying that's park. But it does limit what can be done on the property, because it's not civic institutional anymore. So civic institutional has more uses that are allowed on the property. So if council wanted to consider developing this site in the future, then it would mean depending on what it is, but if it was housing or something like that, it would require an OCP amendment.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Deputy Mayor,
Yes.
which I guess everyone would understand would be like a nightmare, right? No, it would, like, so, anyway, just, that's why I'm concerned.
Well, unless we do civic, but in this area, we cannot build anything. I don't know what's the answer. I think my understanding is the concern came forward because before civic wouldn't allow housing. Am I correct? And now it does. That's my understanding. That in the past, the public wasn't concerned with the designation, but now because civic allows housing, and I think there's a big concern.
To Deputy Mayor, I can share the details of the designations there. So when it was civic institutional, it talked about services to the community at large, including schools, places of assembly, worship, recreation facilities, government offices, public care facilities, utility, and then residential may be permitted, residential rental at this designation. So that has been struck from the Charmin lands. What we've placed there is a blend of some parks and recreation and some conservation and open space. So in parks and recreation, it's to permit park space developed for active and informal use, including community and neighborhood parks. I think it's still an open question that parks can be very manicured or they can be left very much in a natural state. But it also allows you to, should you wish to consider it in the future, indoor or outdoor recreation, so future buildings. But the other designation that's applied to part of it, and which we intend to really place along the ravine from top of bank, from bank to bank, is to protect natural landscapes and greenways, to restrict intensive development and minimize detrimental impacts on land and water in these areas. So those are the two designations that we're proposing be placed on those lands in response to the feedback that we got.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone, for the in-depth discussion. I don't see Councilor Crowe.
I'd like to move the recommendations, including the and that.
Oh, yeah, we haven't is this the 25,000, right? Yes, we haven't discussed that, but I think at least I understand. Did any councilor has a concern? Okay, Councilor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, just wanted to confirm that that's to complete the work. It's not additional work for the fund allocation.
That's correct.
Thank you, so do I have a seconder for the recommendation? Councilor Thompson? Any other discussion? All in favor? It passes. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. I'd rather have the painful questions now than later. So I think it's important. And I really hope that staff considers, I'm going to ask the people that, well, we already told them, but anyone that didn't receive that, we still have time for the zoning feedback, because I think some people are behind. And I just want to be able to have them all. Okay, thank you very much. And the next meeting, the next special meeting of council to be held on Tuesday, October 21st at 1 p.m. And I would like to adjourn the meeting. Okay, I have a moved by Councilor Thompson, second by Councilor Crowe. All in favor? Thank you.